Okay, welcome back to my conversations about the future of business and technology. AI adoption is accelerating at an unprecedented rate, with five businesses adopting AI every minute. But while startups are leading the charge, many larger enterprises risk falling behind. In today's conversation, I'm joined by Tanuja Randery, the Vice President and Managing Director of AWS EMEA. Welcome, Tanuja.
Thank you so much, Bernard. It's wonderful to be joining you here today on a topic that we are very excited about.
Yes, and today we want to unpack the key findings from AWS's latest AI report, which explores the opportunities and challenges shaping Europe's AI landscape and discuss what businesses need to do to stay competitive in this AI driven future. The report highlights this rapid surge in AI adoption across Europe. How does this pace compare to previous technological revolutions, and what do you see as the key drivers behind this acceleration?
Great question. It is very encouraging, actually, with our latest report, particularly, I think, as we sit here in Europe around the AI potential, to see the acceleration even versus the last year, Bernard. So, what we are seeing actually is that the AI adoption has increased, or the number of firms that regularly use AI has gone up to 42%. You mentioned the five businesses every minute. I love that factoid. That is actually just compared to last year, an increase of 27%. So it's quite a significant increase. And picking up your point on how does this compare to other technologies, we certainly think and believe that AI is probably the most transformative technology we've seen in a long time. We were pioneers of the cloud, as when cloud was very transformative. We believe this has the potential to be even more transformative than that. Obviously, cloud is an important foundation. And in fact, what we are seeing is the growth rate is surpassing that of the uptake of mobile phones that we saw in the 2000s. So just to put that into context, I think is quite helpful. Look, why are businesses, large, medium, and small, and governments adopting this technology at pace? The reasons are, one, the contribution that this technology can make to efficiency and
Mm.
productivity. And I'll come back to a couple of examples which might be useful for you. The other is, by the way, innovation, really being able to innovate faster with the resources that teams have, businesses have available. And then the third is, of course, a direct result of both of those, which is a contribution to growth.
Mm.
So we're definitely seeing it not just as an efficiency tool or just as an innovation tool, but a very broad brush technology in terms of its impact. And Bernard, let me give you a couple of very specific examples, actually, how businesses are using this technology, because I think it will really bring it to life. If I take on the one hand, in the large company area, BT Group, they have been deploying our Amazon Q developer solution. And what that's been able to do for them is release 12% of time for their software developers, which would have been spent on what you would call tedious tasks associated with software coding. And what Q does is it writes lines of code, and within the first couple of months, it already launched 100,000 lines of code. So that's one example on the very large group side in a core area like software development. On the other hand, you've got, for example, a company in France, ECOP, which is helping speed up the delivery of new medication. And what they do is they almost act like a magic button in a way, which enables their customers to navigate the very complicated medical, regulatory approvals, documents. Sometimes that would require months of work. And by making that available through our generative AI solutions, it just speeds up all of that process, which is important in the overall timeline of bringing medical products to market, right? It goes from months of work to mere seconds. So those are two extremely difficult examples. Let me take one in the government space, because I think that's also very interesting in how it's being used. If you look at the European Parliament, for example, they are using it for their archives. And they've actually created an Ask the European Parliament Archives bot, which will allow people worldwide to search records in multiple different languages. Again, this is super excellent because it reduces document search time by 80%. So those are three very different examples of how AI is being used pragmatically to save time, to release and augment what human beings do, to accelerate delivery of important medicines and life-saving drugs, and obviously to automate core processes.
Yeah, amazing. And you talked about a 27% increase year in AI adoption. That's fascinating. But the report also suggests that we might be creating this two-tier AI economy where larger companies are risking falling behind and startups are accelerating their AI adoption. What do we need to do to change that?
Yes, great. It is an important watch out, I think, for us because both large businesses and startups are very key, right? They offer very different positions. Startups are the innovation engine of the economy. We love that. Enterprises, there are a lot of roles and jobs and contributions that they're making. Look, we are, just to put it in context, large companies are consistently using AI. In fact, what we see in this report is 50% of the larger enterprises are consistently using AI, which is a good thing, right? What startups do differently from the large companies is startups are actually building entirely new products and services, creating new business models, completely rethinking how they write the core of their code, for example. What we see in the large enterprises is there's currently a much bigger focus on, call it, productivity and efficiency drivers. That's not a bad thing, by the way. I think it's a good thing. I think what we would love to see is large companies also embedding AI across core processes. So if you're in the energy world, both in upstream and downstream, obviously if you're in the healthcare space, actual drug discovery, and we are seeing good examples of these, but we want to see a lot more production use cases happening with large companies. Why the differences and why is this happening? So there are three big barriers that have come through in this report. You alluded to earlier. The first, and I think is an important one in this case, and is a bottleneck to embracing this technology at scale, is skills.
Hmm.
So what we are finding is that large enterprises in particular are finding a hard time getting the digital skills that they require to be able to implement and execute this technology at pace. It's not the technology, actually, that's a blocker. It's really this access to skills that's a blocker, which is why, by the way, you see us investing heavily in education and training. The other is, of course, for large companies, it is also their businesses are a lot more complex.
Hmm.
Businesses have a lot more legacy environments. Startups tend to be digitally native. Right out of the box, they're already cloud first and AI first. So there is a change management and a business process transformation that needs to happen, particularly in the lines of business of these large companies, right? So you've got to make changes in the finance process, in HR processes, and in manufacturing processes, in maintenance processes. And that needs to happen in order for the technology to add value. So that's the second thing, tied very closely to the first, which is around digital skills. And then I think the final point I would mention that I think is super important is the regulation. What we're hearing again through this report very loud and clear is that navigating AI regulations here in Europe does feel a bit like solving a puzzle while the pieces are still changing. So I think what I mean by that is the cost of compliance for businesses is high. 40 euros out of 100 euros you could spend on technology is spent on compliance. So we've really got to get to simplification on that front as well.
Yeah, I'd love to dive a little bit into both skills and regulatory uncertainty. Maybe we can start by skills. What do organizations need to do other than boost their data and AI literacy themselves, running programs, giving people space to learn, hopefully making themselves attractive to recruit people and get those talent that everyone is fighting for? Have you seen anything interesting that organizations do to accelerate this?
Look, the impact of closing the skills gap can be quite phenomenal. So we believe, based on the work we've done with this report, and by the way, in speaking to CEOs daily, that it could boost for Europe, for 46% business, excuse me, for 46% of businesses in Europe, it could really boost growth, right? So I think we've got to go solve this problem. The problem is multi-layered in order for it to be able to be addressed. So one, we've got to make sure that there is access to education to all, right? And this is where we have really focused. You will know that we've trained 31 million learners around the world for absolutely free through a variety of programs, both digital with universities, etc. And I think not all citizens have the opportunity to reskill with AI. Not all of them have the ability to spend the money to take the courses to retrain themselves. So I think making education available and democratizing, therefore, access is super, super important. I think the other thing is, if you look at educational curriculum in universities, in colleges, in schools, we must make sure, and we, by the way, will play a big part and are playing a big part of this, that we are preparing the next generation for this new technology. So curriculum needs to be updated to reflect cloud, AI, machine learning, generative AI, etc. I have a CEO friend who's a colleague who's taken a week off to go to Singularity University in Silicon Valley. There's this energy to learn, and it's very important that we do learn. Learning never stops, I think, as we say. So that's the other thing. And then, look, economic disparities. We need to address that issue as well, which is why free learning is very important. Learning where people can do learning after work, learning where we are really addressing underserved communities that don't have access to this. You might know that in Africa, as an example, we put in place our first skills center outside the US, and it's been just a phenomenal impact for the South African community in terms of education. So that's the education. In organizations, I think reskilling, to your point, is really important, because if people are used to working with legacy environments, ensuring that they're being reskilled to be able to use this new technology is critical, which means, you're right, creating space for learning is really important. And actually, to be honest, giving managers the freedom and empowerment to be able to create that space for their teams is really critical. And then eventually, I would say it's really important for us to ensure that there is continued funding going in to making education available and fresh at all times, so people can actually, again, access the latest and greatest. And I think in the world that we live in, this is less of the problem, because you can do it actually very easily compared to having go to a classroom. But those are some of the things that must happen if we're going to boost growth for businesses in Europe.
Yeah, I agree with all of this. And I think it's never been easier to learn. At the same time, I think organizations need to give people the space and encouragement to learn and boost their data and digital literacy skills.
Could I just add, sorry,
Yeah,
one other thing that just comes to my mind as I think about this is there's also learning by doing. And I should have mentioned that, because it's not just about reading a book or a manual, etc. It's also learning by doing. And I think making these technologies available so people can experiment, teams can experiment, is key, right? Because if you don't allow experimentation at the edge, you won't actually, we don't believe you can innovate if you don't do that, and you won't get the best ideas. So I think giving organizations the tools and the platforms to experiment securely is very important. And one of the reasons we introduced our way of looking at generative AI solutions with Amazon Bedrock is Amazon Bedrock gives our customers access to a choice of models, everything from our own Amazon Nova models to Mistral to Stability, etc., in a very secure environment where you can use models, but your data always stays with you. It's a virtual private cloud infrastructure. And so I think for me, I would say making Bedrock available so that people can experiment securely and come up with the ideas and the use cases is going to be really important. I think we need to create that energy for innovation.
yeah. Again, I completely agree. And I think having these sandboxed versions that are safe to use are super important. You touched on regulatory uncertainty, and in the report, it actually says that businesses would invest or they're investing 28% less in AI due to confusion over compliance. How can companies navigate this challenge?
Yes, so I think what we are hearing, I think it's important. Look, we are very confident that Europe's got the foundations to really drive very impactful success in this area. The adoption is energizing, and we see it also positively in the public space around healthcare and sustainability. We've got strong research capabilities, robust institutions, phenomenal group of startups, public sector adoption. But absolutely, we need to also make it easier for people to understand regulation, where we are proponents of regulation, by the way, in this space. We know you have to protect citizens' data and their trust. Security for us has always been foundational in everything that we do, but we do think innovation must be allowed. Regulation that is innovation friendly, regulation that's consistent internationally and across markets, regulation that is much more use case specific rather than the technology, regulation that doesn't create these cost burdens that I mentioned earlier. Those are the things we need to address. It isn't that I think people or our customers believe that we should not have regulation. In fact, everyone is very keen on AI being a very responsible technology. But a lot of that will be also based on ensuring that people can understand the regulations so that they can actually actively apply it. And so I think clarity and simplification, consistency, and freedom to innovate within guardrails will be important.
Yeah, I agree. And you talked about this puzzle that businesses need to navigate with all the different regulations all across Europe, across the world. That's a big challenge. The report outlines a 3-point plan for AI adoption. What are the most urgent actions that businesses and governments need to take right now to boost their AI capabilities and make AI work within their organization?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think I might split it up into a couple of different ways to think about this. I think one, whether you're a small business or a medium business or a startup or an individual or a student, this is the time for accelerated learning and development. The technology is moving at an incredible pace. You will see every single day new models emerging. But this isn't just about large language models, by the way. I think it's really important that the technology in the core of businesses is really very key, not just in terms of large language models. But it is an accelerated time of learning and development. And I think one of the things I would say is we all owe it to ourselves and to our customers and to the businesses that we're part of to focus our time and energy around learning this technology, getting curious about this technology, and frankly, finding ways to innovate with the technology, whatever it might be. It could be it's a simple to-do list that you want to do differently, right? The tools are available. You can use it right now, by the way. You can go onto our console. You can get those tools, right? So that's one I'd say for everybody across the board. It doesn't matter who you are. I think for enterprises, what we would like to see is them really starting to embed this technology in their businesses, in the core of their processes. And the reason we say that is it will give them the most material impact with regards to either savings or growth. If you apply them in lots of little projects that are interesting, maybe from the perspective of trial, but it's not going to be one that materially moves your EBITDA line or your revenue line or your CapEx line or your OpEx line. It's never going to become part and parcel of the company. And frankly, you'll never get the investments that are needed in order for this to scale. So I think really looking across the board, irrespective of your industry, on where you can embed this technology into the core of your processes, I think will be very critical for large enterprises. With startups, I think we need to ensure the funding is available, venture capital funding, so startups can continue to bring new products to market, which is what they do day in and day out. And I think we have an incredible group of startups here in Europe. We need to ensure that they are well funded, and have access to funding so that they can continue to innovate at the rate that they're doing. I think for governments, it is again about adopting and embracing this technology. The way we're doing providing this technology, your data is secure, the foundations are secure, we have responsible AI guardrails. It can be implemented now. And I think, again, if I take the European Parliament example where they're using this very effectively, those are the kinds of things that we want to see. So adoption in a secure environment, making the technology available at the edge, ensuring people understand what it means to be responsible users of this technology. So let's educate on that front as well. And then finally, I would say to you, let us continue to invest in skill building, public and private partnerships to do that. Let us continue to invest in making sure regulations are simplified and consistent across international markets.
Thank you so much, Tanuja, for sharing this. I really encourage anyone watching, listening to have a look at the report. It's such a detailed report with so much useful insights and advice on gives you a really good flavor of what's happening across Europe in the AI space and what we need to do differently. So thank you so much. And I will put the link into the below the video and in the comments so people can see where to find out more. For anyone who ever wants to rewatch this or re-listen to this, simply head to any podcast platform or my YouTube channel. Thank you so much, Tanuja.
Thanks, Bernard. It was lovely talking to you.
Likewise.